Hello writers, my name is Tennyson E. Stead. I'm a working screenwriter, I'm a working script doctor, and welcome to The Right Stuff. This is lesson 1 in our 5-part series on writing your 30-minute comedy or animation television show. In this course, we're going to break down the work week to week of writing the pilot episode and writing the show Bible for a 30-minute television series. And inevitably, that 30-minute series is either going to be a comedy show or an animated series. And the first question we're going to run into here is why is comedy and animation always 30 minutes? Why don't other shows get to be 30 minutes? And the simple reason is production constraint. For a lot of shows, writing comedy is a process of trial and error. Some things aren't going to work, some things aren't going to hit the way you want them to, and you want time on set to sort of work on the repetition and work the bugs out and make sure everything clicks. And when it comes to animation, producing a minute of animation, regardless of the style of that animation, is prohibitively expensive. And the only shows that are an hour long on television that are animated shows are notoriously expensive, regardless of their animation style. They are supported by some of the biggest names in show business, which is why the money was coughed up for the hour-long series, and they still take twice as long to produce a series as any other animated series. So if you plan on producing hour-long animation or hour-long comedy, number one, you need to be prepared for the fact that you're only going to be able to release a season once every 2 years. And particularly in animation, you need to make sure that your audience isn't growing up in the meantime. You need to make sure that the kids who started watching your show are still of an age where they're invested in seeing the next season when that next season comes out. So that's one thing. The other thing is you need to make sure that you have the name and that you have the money behind you to push that series forward, even in the face of massive resistance from absolutely everybody involved in producing and distributing that show. If this is your first television show, you're not there yet. Having said that, and understanding that comedy can be very hit and miss and that it involves a lot of experimentation, a big part of my job here is going to make sure that you don't have to do that experimentation. I'm going to try and eliminate as much of the guesswork as possible and put you in a position where you can impress your producers and you can impress your actors on set. Because good comedy in the hands of a bunch of actors is almost entirely structural. People will tell you that it's about timing, people will tell you that it's about tone, and those things are important. But those things only work as a product of good structure. Okay? To begin this conversation, I want to refer you to the video at the top of this page, the one that says, "Watch Me." That video is called Prelude, the most elusive and important fundamental in show business. And in that video, I talk about the most basic building blocks of an actor's performance. It is, and by the way, when I say actor, I include animators and voice actors in the conversation. Anytime you are performing a narrative for an audience, you are an actor. Theater is when A performs B for C. Okay? So the work that animators do, the work that voice actors do is acting. And most screenwriters don't really understand how acting works. In that video, we're going to give you a basic vocabulary for how acting theory contributes to screenplay structure. So if you haven't seen the video, please watch it now. I will wait. At this point, we all have a consensus that actors perform actions. Tone is a byproduct of the actions of the characters. If somebody is doing something very procedural and something that involves a lot of personal trauma, then the tone is going to be very dark and it's going to create a nagging sense of impatience, because that's what we're watching. We're watching somebody pick through the nitty-gritty of unpleasant stuff. And so the tone emerges from the efforts of the characters to accomplish their goals. Comedy works the same way. In the hands of an actor, Comedy is what happens when a character commits 200% to an action for which they are horrifically ill-equipped, right? Chaplin's best movie is City Lights. City Lights is about a homeless jerk trying to pay a blind girl's rent. And, pay your own rent, guy. He's not going to do that. He's not going to do the reasonable thing. He's going to do the absurd thing because the goal that he's trying to achieve is so far out of reach for him that he only has absurd options available. He's going to say, no, don't worry about it. I'm going to ask my rich friends for help. You don't have rich friends, right? Finding Nemo is about a little tiny clownfish with a fear of open spaces, a very valid fear, going to swim across a whole freaking ocean to save his kid from a fish tank in a dentist's office. He doesn't know what a dentist's office is. He doesn't know what a fish tank is. The solution to Marlin's problem is to go back to the sea anemone, find a pretty clownfish, make some Nemos, build a new life. Not what he does. Instead, he swims out across the ocean, finds the only fish in the ocean as bad at this as he is, and doubles down every step of the way. Right? Beverly Hills Cop is about a man with no policing skills, only the skills of a street hustler, trying to break a case that he is not even allowed to be involved in as a black man in the whitest and most anally retentive district in the country. So, and by the way, animation works exactly the same way. What we're talking about here is absurd effort. The effort is what people watch when they watch an actor. Great stories on the stage and screen are made from the efforts of characters to achieve overwhelmingly challenging goals. Watching the effort is what pulls us in. Comedy is just absurd, well-motivated effort. Okay? And animation is essentially the same. We're watching a clownfish swim across the ocean to save his kid from a dentist's office. That's ridiculous. And we're physically watching him do it. It's not the metaphor, it's not the tone that makes it work. The fact that the action is absurd is where the tone comes from. And the fact that the only people that are going to help this poor little clownfish are of necessity going to be ridiculous in and of themselves, because no one else would. Nobody else would. So of course the friends he makes along the way are going to be nuts. That's because that's who he's going to respond to his efforts. Okay? So whether we're talking about animation or whether we're talking about like a sitcom or anything else, the ridiculousness of the effort involved in what the character is trying to achieve is going to drive absolutely everything about this show. If you want to make an animated series, make a show about a groundhog trying to run for president. Make it an ordinary groundhog. It doesn't need to be able to speak. It's funnier if it doesn't, because that makes it less likely that it's going to win the election. And the harder that groundhog tries, the more ridiculous those efforts are going to become. As long as it doesn't give up, as long as it understands the scope of what it's trying to do and it keeps on stepping up, there's no way things don't get really stupid really fast. Okay? And the only difference between that and a live action show is that the absurdism of the live action show just can't be as visual. You need to find ridiculous things for people to try and do in their human bodies. Right? You can have, somebody trying to make friends with somebody who hates them. You can have, do you understand what I'm saying? As long as the effort is so far out of reach, as long as the goal is so far out of reach, that there's absolutely no chance that the protagonist is ever going to achieve it. And as long as they are twice as committed to achieving that goal as any reasonable person would be, you can follow that effort all the way through the series and you will always get laughs. BoJack Horseman is a show about somebody who has done Hollywood as wrong as you possibly can. Somebody who has burned every bridge and hurt every person, damaged their relationship with the audience and everybody else trying to make a comeback. He's a drunk. He's a mess. This person doesn't need fame. They shouldn't have fame. There's no planet on which BoJack Horseman should be able to become a star again. So the harder he tries, the funnier the show gets. So the one thing that we want to stay away from and this is true in any kind of acting narrative, but it's just as true in comedy, is the situation. We don't put a character in a situation that they don't belong in. We let that character create the situation they don't belong in through their efforts to achieve the goal. The goal, the thing they're trying to achieve, that's the thing they don't belong in, and they're trying to get in there. And that way you never went out of show. So whether we're talking about animation or whether we're talking about live action comedy, the first thing we have to do here is decide what is the action that the show is about. Are we making a show about a groundhog trying to run for president? Are we making a show about some kid in high school trying to make friends with the bully who hates them the most? Right? What is the action that drives the show? What is the end goal of the protagonist? The last moment of the last episode is going to be the moment when the groundhog becomes president, or the moment when the kid makes friends with the bully, right? Gets that respect that they're looking for, in spite of all the things that they're going to have to do to get it, or whatever the case may be. You see what I'm saying? What's the end game of the protagonist? Make sure that it is the most ridiculous possible outcome. Do not pull punches here, because the one thing that the audience will not believe is the halfway point. You need something so dramatically far out of reach for this character that they will never be able to stop swinging for the fences. They will never be able to stop putting in maximum effort times 2 in order to get there. There will be no day when circumstances help them along with this even a little bit. No matter what you come up with, it's not about the themes being juxtaposed. That's how comedy works in literature, right? We see one idea, we see another idea, they don't belong together, and our brain is kind of filling in the blanks. We traffic a lot in metaphor when it comes to literature. Animation can be metaphorical in the subtext. Live action can be metaphorical in the subtext, but it's a literal art. There really is a badger, or whatever we said, groundhog running for president. That's happening on the screen. It's what the show's about. And that can mean whatever it means. But it's about that groundhog's best efforts to achieve this out of control goal. So don't minimize the challenge of the ultimate goal and then spend the rest of the show trying to amp up the stakes and make them seem more ridiculous than they actually are in order to get laughs. You're just going to wind up putting banana peels everywhere. You understand what I mean? Don't do that to yourself. Make the inherent engagement of this completely ridiculous goal the most absurd thing about the show. You don't ever want to have to reach farther than that, so reach as far as you can right now. That's what the series is about achieving that massive endgame goal. Now that you got that goal, you need to think up whatever the first major, huge milestone would be in achieving that goal. You know, if the if the groundhog is trying to win the presidency, then maybe they need to succeed in politics on some other level, or maybe they need to get themselves on the ballot. There's some big important step that they're going to have to take, and now you have a goal for the end of the first season. Okay, that's what your first season of television is going to be about. So maybe we're making a nebbish kind of freaks and geeks, very intimate situational comedy about this nerd trying to get the bully to be their friend. What would be the first major milestone, especially if it's a very intimate, drawn-out kind of cringe-style comedy? What would be the first big step? Would be maybe getting some kind of acknowledgement that the protagonist is a human being. Maybe it's that. And maybe that takes a whole season of television. I think that could be extremely painful to watch, right? Watching somebody try for 12 episodes to make that happen. And this is the next point. Your comedy series is going to be 12 episodes long, because that's what half-hour shows get on a good day with the streaming services. Do not go for more than 12 episodes, and don't go for less than 12 episodes, because people aren't going to want to support a show that doesn't have legs on it. You can always trim, right? You can always cut back is going to be the mentality with the executives, but you can't always add more, at least in their mind. So 12 episodes is exactly what you want to write. The next thing that we need to create to make this show happen is an episode breakdown. You need to know where you need to go from your pilot episode. You need to know where the momentum is carrying you, which means having a plan. Okay? So we've decided at this point what the goal for the protagonist is of the first season of television. Maybe it's getting that acknowledgement that I'm a human being from the bully. Maybe it's succeeding in politics and becoming a governor or something if I'm the groundhog. You understand what I'm saying? That's the goal. What are the biggest 12 steps in achieving that goal? One after the next. Write a list of the 12 biggest, most challenging things that this character is going to have to do. Not the things that have to happen to them, but the things they physically have to go make happen for themselves in order to achieve this goal. And remember, when audiences are watching the effort, it's the effort that they're watching. So it's not just about making things happen. It's not just about logistically important things and I've got to go fill out this paperwork and now this is my big milestone for the episode. I'm talking about the 12 things that are going to challenge the protagonist the most. The biggest things the protagonist needs to do in terms of their effort. Because what people watch at the end of the day is an action that is incredibly well motivated and highly likely to fail. Something that's very demanding in terms of that effort, something that the protagonist is going to have to struggle so hard at, in fact, that they're going to have to grow and change who they are in order to succeed. So make a list of those 12 things that the protagonist has to do to get from their very first effort to achieve their goal to the point where they've achieved their goal for this particular season of television. Each of those things is an episode. We're going to revisit this list later on in the process, once we finish the pilot episode, as we write our show Bible. And we'll get into what a show Bible is in just a little bit, when we get there. But this here list is going to become the foundation of your episode breakdown for this show. Okay? So the first thing on that list, the first goal that your protagonist needs to achieve in order to see this larger mission through, that's what your pilot episode's about. That's the goal for the pilot episode. Now we know what the pilot episode's about. The last little bit of story arc that we need to build before we get to the character stuff is going to be the arc of the pilot episode, which is the first episode of the series. All right? So you've made that list of 12 actions that your character needs to complete in order to fulfill their goals for season 1. That first item is what your pilot episode is about. What are the 3 overwhelmingly challenging things your protagonist needs to do in order to make this first episode goal happen? Break that goal down into 3 steps. And these steps are not things that need to happen for the protagonist or to the protagonist. They are things the protagonist needs to do, and they are things that are going to be very challenging for the protagonist to do, so much so that they're going to have to learn and grow to see it through. What are those 3 things? Remember, your protagonist is incredibly ill-equipped to make these goals happen. Do not hide from this. Don't try to create a situation that brings the goal within reach. Don't create a reason why a groundhog can be president. Don't create a reason why the nerd is going to get the bully to like them. Don't create reasons for these things to happen, because that takes the absurd, stupid work away from your protagonist. If those reasons don't exist, then your protagonist is going to have to do crazy, stupid things to make them happen. And that's the comedy. Okay? It's not the situation. It's not the absurd situation that people laugh at. It's the absurd effort. So do not undermine the efforts of your protagonist by creating situations that make the comedy permissible. The comedy should not be permissible. Okay? There's no planet on which a groundhog should be president. There's no planet on which this kid should be able to make friends with their abuser. So the trying is going to have to be more intense and more ridiculous and more committed. They're going to have to dig so deep to make even simple things happen. So what are the first 3 simple things that your protagonist needs to do to make this goal happen? What are the 3 things they need to do to achieve the goal of their first episode? Make that list. Guess what? That's Act 1 and Act 2, and I just hit my microphone. That's Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 of your show. Once you have those acts, I want you to step away a little bit, and I want you to write a 3-paragraph treatment of the pilot episode. Act 1, and no more than 3 sentences per paragraph. Please, we're going to keep this extremely brief and to the point. You're just creating a little bit more connective tissue in your story. What does the protagonist do in Act 1 to see their goal through? What does the protagonist do in Act 2 to see their goal through? What does the protagonist do in Act 3 to see their goal through? We're going to revisit this document a little bit later on, but fundamentally what we're writing here is the pilot summary that's going to go into your show Bible a little bit later on. All right, right now it's a writing tool, and all we're doing is we're making sure that you can start fleshing this story out without creating situations, without creating things to happen to your character to drive the story forward. We want to make sure that you have the basic tools and the imagination to actually let your character do the work of driving their own story forward, no matter how stupid and ridiculous it is. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is harder than it sounds, because as much as we want to write comedy, we don't want that comedy to be the protagonist's fault. We want to protect ourselves and our protagonists from the humiliation of being them. We have that impulse. So it is very natural to want to kind of gimmick our way through this. Don't let it happen. Stick to the things that your protagonist is doing to move their own story forward. How is that groundhog going to do the first 3 things that they need to do to make themselves viable in politics? And specifically, given the tools that your groundhog has, what do their best efforts look like to make this happen? As those best efforts blow up in their face, as they obviously should, how do they step up their game? How do they escalate the conflict to the point where they actually succeed? Best advice I ever got about comedy, about writing comedy in the theater, came from a professor named Harley Erdman back in the 90s. And Harley said, drama is when a character succeeds because of their best efforts. Tragedy is when a character fails in spite of their best efforts. And comedy is when a character succeeds in spite of their best efforts. Comedy is about the effort. And it's about a character pushing that effort so hard and so far that success is transformed from a certainty of failure into an inevitability just because they've basically exhausted the rest of the world to the point where you just got to let them have it. That's how comedy works. So don't hand your character a tailored situation that makes their goal possible. Let it be impossible and let them struggle through an escalating effort to do the impossible thing until their ridiculousness becomes more overwhelming than the odds against them. With all that being said, we also have to put a little bit work into characters. Anytime I'm writing a show or a movie, I will make a list of the most important characters. Usually it's 2 to 6 characters in the medium. And I will set a timer for 30 minutes. And I will write 2 pages on each individual character in turn, 30 minutes per character. I'm not trying to create a bio. I'm not trying to create a reference document. This is not something anybody else is ever going to read. All I'm doing is warming up my ability to create details about these characters. So if I run out of things to say and the clock is ticking and I'm not writing, I will start asking my questions on the page. Like, what does this character like to do for fun? What's their favorite ice cream flavor? What was their favorite game when they were a kid, or whatever? I will ask questions and answer them just to break the ice and get used to generating details about this character on the fly, so that as I'm writing that character on the page, I'm a little bit more loose and I'm a little bit more ready to be specific. I recommend doing that as soon as you finish the rest of that, the work that we've just discussed. And that is the end of your work for this week. Next week, we're going to actually start writing your show. So take some time this week. Break those episodes down. 12 episodes, 12 major steps, all of them action. None of these things can be things that happen to your characters. They're all things your character does to move their story forward, and they all need to be overwhelmingly challenging on roughly an equal level. Each of them overwhelmingly challenging enough that you can spend 22 minutes breaking down how the character did that thing. And then once you've done that, break that first action down into 3 roughly equally challenging major steps that you can spend an act on, and then polish your pilot summary. And we'll return next week to walk you through Act 1 of writing your pilot episode. Please like and subscribe. Please do that. And thank you very much for showing up. This has been The Right Stuff with Tennyson E. Stead. I look forward to learning with you.